with the other entities and organizations here in Virginia, and then also with the rest of the United States. So it's an exciting time. We have a lot to say and a lot of good news stories to get out, something we have not done a good job of. We're very good at what we do, safely operate our nuclear facilities, do what we do, head down, make sure we're good at what we do. We just don't do a good job of telling everybody else who we are and what we do. And there's lots of folks that unfortunately are out there saying things about us that just, many of them just aren't true, or are flawed or biased, and as a result, we have a responsibility to ourselves and to our constituency to make sure they hear both sides of that story. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to make sure both sides of that story gets out there. So, quick questions or comments, ladies and gentlemen, about what we're doing.
You might talk a little bit about the national assets legislation, what kind of track it's on.
Yeah, the national assets legislation was something that I wanted to submit when I was president of the American Nuclear Society, but the ANS did not want to step up and do it. It wasn't something that any I felt like they could do, so I submitted it as an individual, and now I'm running it through different forms, but I have several senators and congressmen whose names have not necessarily been released. I've met with each one of their offices, got their agreement and the concept, and that is basically that if you took a nuclear power plant that's operating today and you designed, constructed, licensed, and placed into operation, it would have been 8-10 years at a cost of hundreds of millions of dollars 2 decades ago. To do the same thing today would probably take longer and certainly be billions, not hundreds of millions. And we have these plants that have gone through license renewal, extended power uprate, have gone through a number of different assets improvements, post-Fukushima safety upgrades, and a number of different things that are truly capable of continuing to operate for another 20 years plus, and yet they're being prematurely shut down simply because they cannot economically compete in the region in which they're operating. Some of the facilities recently shut down, as many of us in here could attest. If we could lift it up and put it in Southeast United States, it would be running just fine. But whether they're in a regulated market or they're competing with the low price of natural gas, or they're continuing to compete in energy markets which are just severely flawed and very, very much in favor of wind and solar and other renewables, to the extent that they're actually unfavorable intentionally and knowingly to nuclear. And again, we're not asking for anything special, we're asking for a level playing field, and that is not what we have. And so we're suggesting that the unique value of nuclear, the kilowatt that comes from a nuclear power plant, cannot be equated to just a kilowatt coming from any other source. We're talking about it from the standpoint of economy, of environment, and energy. The fact that it's the only base load, environmentally friendly energy source that so many of our policymakers, when they speak the language of wind, solar, and nuclear, they truly think all three of those are the same. They think wind, solar, and nuclear are all created equal. Well, how sad. So when you describe the laws of physics and why that's just not true, and lay that all out for them, and they realize that wind and solar, while important, and we're not suggesting they not play a part of the role, are peakers and are not the kinds of energy sources that you truly want to recognize as the backup or the backbone of what's happening in the nation. And when you explain to them the tens of billions of dollars that's been spent on research and development, and the additional tens of billions of dollars that has been spent on the unique subsidies to continue to operate them, and yet they only provide 3.7% of the nation's energy, and you ask them, if you don't mind having energy only 3.7% of the time, then okay, deal with that. Let that be your only energy source. Otherwise, you might want to give serious consideration, if you're looking for carbon emissions reduction, to considering nuclear, given the fact that that's the only real one you can do that with. So and I'm quickly running through this because you all know this, but when you lay these kinds of things out in factual statements and just a few mechanisms, it's amazing how much traction you can get with people when they see the facts. Because many of them have been dissuaded by things that just simply aren't true. So that's the whole issue on that. The track it's on currently, as I said, I go down every time I'm in country, and then to go down at least to see one congressman or senator a week and their staff. And we keep trying to get them on. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get 535 or some majority, but my intent is to try to have it done this year. Fascinatingly enough, I'm not going to get into any of the politics of any of the issues, but I have reached out and spoken to several of the candidates for president, both Democrat and Republican alike, and I have more meetings. I'll have a meeting at the end of April with Donald Trump, which hopefully he'll let me tape. I'm joking. But I'm going to be talking to him about energy policy, because I don't hear him say anything about that, and I want to make sure that he understands that in the event he gets elected, to understand the role that nuclear plays in the energy policy, and to tell him that he needs policy. I've already talked to Bernie Sanders, who was reasonably acceptant of it. I haven't got Hillary Clinton to agree to talk to me yet. I will be meeting with Ted Cruz in May, and some of the other folks that I'd already talked to have already dropped out of the race. So the important thing is that, in my opinion, we have the responsibility to ensure that we are leveraging the truth about the fascination and the uniqueness of our science technology. No one else is going to do it for us. In fact, au contraire, others are going to speak ill of it. So it's our responsibility to ensure that we are out there telling the truth about who we are and what we do. Dave, what question were you going to ask me?
Just two comments. I can't remember if I mentioned it last time, but I was on a panel with Judd Gregg and Allison McFarland up at Yale University, and the environmental science professor that introduced me, or us, Ponytail and all, said, we got to have nuclear to fight climate change. So that's, a bit of a sea change for Yale over the last 20 years. So I think the climate change directive, I guess, has really influenced a lot of people. The other was a question is, have you interacted with Sean McGarvey at the Building and Trades of the AFL-CIO?
Not at all.
He's definitely on board, and he's got a new counterpart, or a person in Virginia, I forget the fellow who just retired, was Tony Regali. We should make sure that there's a connection with.
Could we,
with
outside of this, would you be kind enough to give that to me?
Yeah.
And anybody has any of those suggestions, I'm wide open to them. The fact is that I can't do this fast enough and often enough. I have a company I own and I'm supposed to operate, although I've been told by my vice presidents that the first word in president is to preside, and I'm failing miserably to do that. But I'm passionate about this industry, and I really believe that we haven't been able to do the kinds of things we need to do, and I think the window of opportunity is so rapidly closing. If we don't do it now, that opportunity may never exist, especially with the premature closings of plants like Kewanee and Vermont Yankee, and the consideration of Fitzpatrick, and Pilgrim, and now others that are on the market, and you see what Exelon's saying about Clinton and giving it up for the betterment of Illinois, and there's just so many things that we're working with. So Michael Schellenberger from Breakthrough Institute, he and I are working on Diablo Canyon and trying to, because right now the governor and lieutenant governor of California are adamant, we don't need Diablo Canyon, but when you paint the picture for them about the energy source in California, yes they do, because right now the reason California gets, I'm going to say this nicely, the reason California can say what they say, can still meet all their requirements, is because the vast majority of dirty energy, if you want to use that term, for the California utilizes, comes out from other states. Well, when and if those states that are adjacent to California are forced to meet with any kind of Clean Energy Act or Clean Power Plan or any kind of initiative, California's not going to have those assets. They're going to have to create them themselves, either build them new or whatever the case may be. And if you look at the situation, there are many cases where there will be rolling blackouts, not brownouts in California, if things don't change in the next 5 years. So we're trying to at least provide the facts to the Lieutenant Governor and Governor so that they make intelligent decisions, informed decisions, instead of what personally, in my opinion, to this point, in some cases have been decisions that weren't necessarily factually based. So,
More BS come from Donald.
say again?
He's been commentating during your talks,
Who has?
the photographer, calling it bullshit and making comments.
You don't have the authority to make comments like that. You are as a public here. You may certainly feel free to listen. But and when the public opportunity for comment comes, I look forward to hearing your comments. But thank you very much for having the audacity to speak like that. So, anything else you might want to hear about this?
Do you want to mention licensing renewal, since that came up at the last meeting? Going from 60 years to 80 years is going to be an issue Virginia could take the lead in because of Dominion.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. Maybe you'd like to talk about the Surrey consideration of being the lead plan for 60 to 80?
So we're doing the research and the science, the fundamental science, to determine whether or not Surrey could be extended from 60 to 80 years. And everything we've looked at thus far is favorable. And now 80 to 100, different question, but 60 to 80 looks feasible at this point in time.
There are so many activities and initiatives, ladies and gentlemen, that are going on that all integrate together, that none of this really stands on its own. The fact is, I think that's one of the things that's so important for us to all recognize, that we are truly in an exciting time for our science and technology, for us to recognize and acknowledge the contributions it's already made to the quality of life of humankind, and the contributions it must and can continue to make for our future. And I think that's our responsibility, to make sure that we're out there telling that message, talking about the facts, because everybody has a right to their own opinion. Everyone does. That's the beauty of living in the United States. But that just because you have an opinion doesn't make it right. That includes me or anyone else. What you have to do is have factual base behind it. The emotional consequences of not making informed decisions for this country are long past. So forgive me if I'm a little adamant and passionate about the fact that we can do a lot and we should be. And I'm anxious to make sure that I'm looking out for everybody in this room, irrespective of their attitude about nuclear. So, is there anything else you think we needed to bring up right now? I mean, there's so many more things I could have done, but I want to just get to that part. So with that in, I'd like to move on to the new business because we have a time frame to make sure that we make, and that is to talk about the energy advances in the Commonwealth. So Hayes, I'd say you're up, my friend.
Well, I appreciate it, and I apologize for not having a PowerPoint, and I certainly will try to live up to the,
Yes.
thank you, the high standards,
Are you saying
at least in terms of speed that Don just showed.
I was getting ready to up-ship the next higher gear, but I did. Were you saying we were in the dark before? Is that what you turned that light on?
It's just that we had a presentation on CC,
Oh, I'm
does
just-
not have one. Yeah.
Thanks.
Just to reintroduce myself, my name is Hayes Fromme. I'm the advisor for infrastructure and development in the Secretary of Commerce and Trade's office within the governor here in Virginia's administration. I was asked to come in and talk a little bit about some of the energy-related policies and initiatives that the governor is doing, not necessarily related to nuclear, or specifically trying to give you guys a little bit of a broader context around what the governor's energy strategy and energy policy is. That energy policy was laid out in the release of his 2014 Virginia Energy Plan. We are actually due this fall to publish an update to that. And so as we have moved out of the General Assembly session, we're moving into thinking about what that looks like. The information provided, obviously providing everyone with an understanding of where we are in terms of the goals that were laid out in the original plan, and then what we will look to do, what the governor will look to do over the course of the next 2 years, and obviously lay foundations for when he leaves office. So just to give you all an idea, and I think we all in Virginia have heard the cliched term, an all-of-the-above energy approach here in Virginia, and it's been used by numerous previous governors. I like to think that this governor has been and will continue to hold true to that in a genuine way. And the policy strategy that he has put forth has kind of been broken down into 4 particular areas of emphasis. This is not by any means exhaustive in terms of what the governor wants to do from an energy perspective, but as he laid out his biggest priorities, he put forward these kind of 4 areas, and they are strategic growth in the energy sector, expanding best-in-class energy infrastructure, talent development in the energy sector, and advanced vehicle technology and alternative fuels. And I think we've had varying degrees of success in the initiatives and the goals that the governor has put forward so far in these various areas. And I'll just, as briefly as I can, go through those, and then happy to answer any questions. From a clean energy industry development standpoint, the focus of the governor has been on creating an environment that facilitates the growth of clean energy technologies and businesses that work in that industry within Virginia's borders. The amount of brain power around this room is impressive to say the least, and I do find myself being grossly underqualified to talk about energy issues when I'm in rooms like this, but I will do my best to talk about what Virginia, what we are trying to do, and kind of put that in the context of what Virginia has done. Everyone in this room knows that Virginia, when you talk about all generating sources, and especially in comparison to other states, our neighbors particularly, we have a fairly diverse energy portfolio. We have about 40% nuclear, 30-ish, 35% natural gas, 28% nuclear, coal rather, and if those numbers don't add up, I was not a math major. And then a small portion that you can kind of consider renewable, but frankly, the vast majority of that portion is pump storage, is hydro. We have very, very little renewable generation in Virginia, frankly. And so when we talk about an all-above energy approach, and we talk about our currently diversified energy portfolio. The bottom line is that does not include a substantial slice of the pie for clean energy. And when I say clean, I am going to specifically refer to solar and to wind. Understanding, folks, it is no surprise that the governor is supportive of nuclear. We do recognize its zero carbon emitting benefits and its baseload generating capacity value. But when I talk in the context of this, I'll talk primarily about solar and wind. So with that, the governor has seen those as he's working to build his the New Virginia economy. He has seen solar and wind as tremendous economic growth opportunities. And so some of the things that he has done to kind of work in both increasing the diversity of our energy portfolio with respect to clean energy, but also understanding that with that would come growth of these high growth potential industries. And with our traditional over-reliance on the federal government for economic growth and economic development, and understanding that that is going away, and it has been, and will continue to. We need to find new industries to diversify the economy, and obviously from energy's perspective, diversify our fuel mix. So just a few things that the governor has done from an administrative perspective. When I say administrative, I mean not pushing through legislation, but actually trying to do with his kind of bully pulpit and with the administrative powers that he has, trying to do things to move forward. So in December of 2015, just last year, end of last year, the governor announced a state renewable procurement target of 8%. So within the next 3 years, the governor is intending to procure up to 8% of the state government's energy load from renewable sources. That equates roughly to about 110 megawatts. The purpose of this is twofold. One is to obviously lower the carbon footprint of the Commonwealth and to increase the energy diversity within the Commonwealth's energy portfolio. But it's also to try and, with the administrative capabilities, help grow and build a renewable and particularly a solar industry, a mature and thriving solar industry in Virginia. So it is broken up, and I'll just give the high level. It is an agreement directly with Dominion for Dominion state facilities and Dominion service territory, and it's broken into two parts. Of that 110 megawatts, the state will work with Dominion on 75% to try and install, to the greatest extent possible on state property, utility scale solar installations, and have the state be the sole off-taker of that power. 25% of that 110 megawatts will be the state working directly with third-party developers to do smaller distributed generated solar on state facilities that will be behind the meter, and that will help offset the state's existing load with 100% renewable power. The line that we have come up with kind of utility scale or distributed generated is 2 megawatts. So anything under 2 megawatts, we will work with third-party developers. Anything over 2 megawatts, we will work with Dominion. And in that agreement with Dominion, we're working on ensuring that there is a competitive process to developing those utility scale solar deployments. Now, they don't have to be on state property at the utility scale level, but the intent is to try and get as much on state property as possible. We think, given that that the state would actually own the assets, would be able to actually buy them the power.
Does that also include cross-border? So for example, you've got the North Carolina border, you've got space there. It doesn't, even if it's potentially in your generating territory?
I don't think it includes North Carolina. There's separate solar development under North Carolina state incentives going on down here.
Yeah, and I would say our intent is to build as much of these assets in Virginia as possible, and by extension, as much on state-owned facilities as possible. So that's one administrative endeavor that the governor has put forward. Just a week ago, is today Wednesday, today Thursday? About 8 days ago, the governor announced, in partnership with Microsoft and Dominion, a public-private partnership that will help build a 20 megawatt solar facility in Fauquier County. The deal essentially is this. Dominion will build, own, and operate the 20-megawatt facility. The state will be the sole off-taker through a long-term power purchase agreement with Dominion, the sole off-taker of 100% of that power. And then Microsoft is purchasing all of the renewable energy credits associated with the power generated from the facility. The governor is very excited about this. We see this as an innovative, a new way to think about how we get more solar power, more renewable power onto the grid in ways that don't require the things in Virginia that we don't have in Virginia, like mandatory renewable portfolio standards, renewable energy tax credits, and things like that. So we're excited. The governor is obviously excited. It does not require state corporation approval per se, because the cost is not going to be borne by the ratepayer, the residential, jurisdictional customers, but Dominion will have to go to the SEC to get a certificate of public convenience and need. The bar for approval, and Davey, tell me if I'm wrong, the bar for approval of a CPC is somewhat lower than the bar for getting ratepayer recovery. So that's a second thing that the governor is doing. From a legislative and budgetary standpoint, last year in the last General Assembly session, the governor signed into law the creation of the Virginia Solar Energy Development Authority. So we have the Virginia Nuclear Energy Consortium Authority. This authority is focused on accelerating the deployment of solar in Virginia and finding ways to make the solar industry in Virginia more robust, more sustainable, and more mature. The governor repurposed a certain amount of economic development dollars that he had from the fiscal year that is coming to an end now. It's about $400,000 to the Solar Energy Development Authority. What they have done is recommend that the Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy use a portion at up to the full amount of that $400,000, but likely somewhat less, to hire a contractor to do a statewide, state facility-specific criteria evaluation to determine the appropriateness of certain state facilities to house solar, whether it is utility scale or whether it is smaller scale distributed generated solar. The purpose of that goes back into this 8% renewable procurement target. Frankly, we just don't know. We have an idea at a high level what sites might be appropriate for solar power to put solar installations on, but this will give us a very kind of detailed desktop analysis of what sites are most appropriate for reaching that 8% renewable procurement target as quickly as possible. DMME is undergoing that right now. It will involve both sites for the utility scale and the third-party development process. But I can tell you that our focus is to try and come up with a set number of sites for the third-party development component and try and get that moving as quickly as possible. We can work directly with Dominion, and that relationship can move fairly quickly with the resources that Dominion has, and obviously the things that we understand with Virginia. There are less larger sites that can house solar power, these utility scale solars. So I think we can pinpoint those a little bit easier. But we want to get that third-party component moving as quickly as possible, really send signals to the small-scale, medium-scale developers that Virginia is serious about getting to this goal as quickly as possible, try and create a pipeline as best we can to move those projects forward as quickly as possible. On the Virginia Solar Energy Development Authority, I will tell you that in this year's budget, the governor did propose additional programmatic funding that was not approved by the General Assembly. But what they did approve was among other things, a new full-time employee position that is focused on renewable and clean energy policy in the Division of Energy within DMME. Part of that role, part of that position's role will be to oversee the Virginia Solar Energy Development Authority. That is not a full-time equivalent position to just do that. And so they will also be focused on other policy initiatives, policy objectives from a clean energy and renewable energy standpoint. So we're actually frankly excited about getting excuse me, new positions within the Division of Energy because it just hasn't happened that often. The DMME is often Division of Energy, and credit goes to Al Christopher and his team. They have often relied on federal dollars to actually staff the Division of Energy. And so this money, in addition to some other funds, will actually, if I'm getting this wrong, Al, tell me, almost triple the state funding dedicated to the Division of Energy. So energy obviously plays a very, very prominent role in everything that happens in Virginia, and now it's time for state government to step up and realize that. And I think the governor's budget will pass in the General Assembly, hopefully signed with no modifications there, will get us a step closer to kind of showing people that Virginia is now serious about being, from a state perspective, about being a leader in energy policy. A couple other things, well actually one other thing real quick on the legislative side, and I'll move on to a couple of other pieces, is last year a bill was passed to, within the net metering statute, to double the size of solar generating system allowed on commercial property for net metering purposes. So the law was 500 kW was the largest system size allowed for commercial properties. Now it's a megawatt. And so it's a small step, but we think it is an important step. I'll move on to energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is another area where the governor has seen focus, and I apologize when I said I was talking about clean energy. I was focused on wind and solar. We do put energy efficiency into that bucket as well. In 2014, the governor signed an executive order which instructed all state agencies to reduce electricity consumption through various energy efficiency measures. The one that was particularly named is a mechanism called energy performance contracting. People pretty familiar with performance contracting. It just as a high level, the idea is you go into a building or a set number of buildings, you identify improvements that can be made, new chillers, new windows, things like that, that can improve the efficiency and reduce energy consumption within that building. You enter into a financing contract by which a company guarantees the amount of energy savings that you will get, and you use those savings to finance the project. And so these are generally in a 15-year, 10 to 15-year, maybe even 20-year contracts. There are times where the amount of savings is so substantial that you buy that down to a 5, 7, 8-year contract, or you keep the contract length at a 15-year, and then you just have actually a revenue stream that you can use for operations for anything else. One example that the governor actually signed this executive order at, the announcement was the DMV building up here on Broad Street. They were able to enter into a performance contracting on a single building to make improvements that realized about a 34% energy savings on an annual basis. And that equated into roughly $235,000 in annual energy savings. So it does provide some substantial consumption reduction benefits, but it also provides, frankly, capital improvement benefits. State agencies are squeezed very, very tight in terms of what they can do from a capital improvement standpoint. And this actually gives them an opportunity to find a revenue stream without going to the General Assembly and actually asking for more dollars. So we're excited about that. We're moving forward. There are a number of state agencies that are evaluating this and that are moving through the process. We are continuing to push. As everyone in this room can attest, there are obviously internal barriers to everything that you try and do, and we're trying to overcome some of those barriers as quickly as possible. It's a challenge, but we are working towards that. From a budgetary standpoint, some of the other things that the governor was able to get in the budget and that the General Assembly passed was to have 2 full-time energy efficiency positions, new energy efficiency positions added. One will oversee all of the various energy efficiency financing programs that have been created by the General Assembly over the years, commercial PACE, various revolving loan funds and things like that. The second position will be focused